Stop there, shipmates! A storm awakens and we've battened down the hatches.
I can't take anymore.
Following on the heels of the most recent Frog Wars Holmes adventure, Chapter 1, The Awakened is a continuation in a young Sherlock Holmes' growth and journey to becoming the great detective. After a journey through Holmes' past on the island of Cordona, Awakened brings Holmes to London, early in his partnership with Watson, to explore who he is now.
Without something to occupy my mind, I turn into an entirely different animal.
It does so by asking questions of belief and rationality as the pair investigate a series of crimes connected to a strange and terrifying Lovercraftian presence across the world as they travel from London and beyond. If the hurt comfort genre fanfiction, or Holmes fiction in general, is your jam, if you'd like to see stories that bring more humanity to Holmes and explore his closeness with Watson before they became legends, this is an enjoyable experience. But it's also grounded enough at times in traditional Holmesian lore to appease the canon lovers. From references to direct quotes, this game shows off a love and respect for the original stories.
My dear fellow, life is infinitely stranger than anything which the mind of man can invent.
Well, life used your newspaper to wipe its posterior, so after that unpleasant discovery this morning, I disposed of it.
The Awakened is a remake of the 2007 game of the same title and rebuilt in the same engine as Chapter 1. I think it's impossible for me to fairly talk about this game without first talking about how it compares to the original. It's one of my favorite things in media to find two takes on the same story and delight in their differences, and Frog Wars achieves just that with these games. The original Awakened wasn't so spooky, although the oddly empty, large, and moody locations certainly added an element of dread to them. Awakened 2023 makes an effort to be creepier in a few ways, mostly through ambience, and amps up the dread all the way to the end of the game. While the goofiness of the older game, in a series that hadn't quite found its masterful stride yet, adds humor and lightness to a darker story, much of 23's humor comes from genuinely brighter moments in a dark game and makes an effort to take itself more seriously.
Which brings us back to my news from earlier. I think I have a case for you, a real one.
Truly?
Indeed.
The game is divided into chapters by location, a nice change of pace after the open, larger world of Chapter 1. But while this is a linear game, the DLC provides nice optional side quests to flesh out most of the areas, and gives you an opportunity to really work on your investigative skills, and your ability to help others. As well as that, each location feels lovingly crafted, with minor details in names and posters, flags blowing in the wind, and footprints on the ground. As the game progresses, locations grow darker and more foreboding, mirroring well the toll the case takes on Holmes' mind. The gameplay is Frog Wars at its best, yet again demonstrating similar investigation techniques honed in the previous game, although slightly streamlined for this shorter title. Cases begin at locations, which you can scour for clues such as footprints, bloodstains, broken items, and more. Notes about the case are recorded in your journal, and you can check these notes for icons, which give you hints on how to progress your line of inquiry. For example, after finding a new object or piece of information, you might want to ask a witness about it. If you're on the trail of a new area, it can help to ask a local to point you in the right direction. At times, it will also be needed to reconstruct events in Holmes' imagination based on the clues that you've uncovered. Pieces from the investigation are stored in Holmes' mind as questions, which you can work to join threads of information together to answer them and move on. Unlike Chapter 1 and to an extent some previous games, which relied on a morality system and a system where you could fail in your deductions, there's not much you can get wrong in this one. Besides the occasional flawed character portrait, you're basically guaranteed to run into the right suspect at the end of your deductions, which make it possible to force the right answer in the mind board by simply eliminating all other choices by trial and error. But the satisfaction of solving the puzzles and clues yourself is a strong deterrent to that. Unlike the original game, which often had puzzles and sequences which didn't make such much sense to follow, and didn't often have clear explanation as to why they were happening, 23's Awakened feels much more purposeful and clear. Investigative elements flow naturally, and it feels very good to get them down. To bring context to some of the slighter step-downs in Smaller World, this game started in development in Ukraine only a few months into the war. It was crowdfunded by a large number of fans of the series, each as respectful of the studio's work as the next. I myself backed the tier allowing demo access, DLC downloads, and the soundtrack, and found it very worth it, not just for the game content alone, but to be able to support such a deserving company out of Ukraine. The devs opened the game with a note about this, describing the game as their own act of resistance. In a way, this also fits the themes of the game as a whole. Watson is back as a playable character in this installment, with a bigger role than the previous as Devil's Daughter or Crimes and Punishments. Here, when a doctor is needed, Watson answers with as much strength and patience and charm as the Watson of the canon. He's given his own opportunity to deduce people, and while it's a similar mechanic to Holmes' ability, Watson tends to rely on his medical expertise rather than his knowledge of people and clues. What shines best about Watson's involvement is how it highlights the intense friendship he and Holmes have begun to cultivate. As Holmes struggles with fear and his own mental health, Watson is here to lend a hand, and when Holmes is incapable of carrying on, Watson carries the adventure easily. The partnership is highlighted well in cutscenes as well. On train journeys and the like, Holmes and Watson are given opportunities to reflect on the case and their lives, and share vulnerabilities to each other. We learn, quite powerfully, of Watson's past in the military as an army doctor and his survivor's guilt. We are reminded, or for first-time players, we learn of Holmes' struggle with his family and his past and how deeply it still cuts him. When Watson falters in his confidence, will he be strong enough and do the right thing? Holmes steps in as a reassuring presence to his friend. And when Holmes doubts his mind, his rationality, and his ability to carry on, Watson is always ready to build him up and urge him forward. Seeing the mystery to its end, we hope, in some ways, will aid them with their internal struggles, but in other ways, it creates new doubts for them. As the mystery into the Cthulhu mythos deepens, we play as Holmes in otherworldly sequences. These normally involve environmental puzzles, all heading to find a way to open a door of pure light, which will bring Holmes back to reality. The only way out is through the abyss. And into the abyss Holmes is pushed, over and over, until he too, with his steadfast trust in the logical, begins to question if such otherworldly things are possible. If we are insignificant, what might lay out there that is greater? The Awakened is very much about fear and how it grips people. As this is foremostly Holmes' story, we are given an intense look on what a fear, a dread of losing the rational sense, of being unable to rely on your own mind, looks like. When you question your reality, when you are capable of falling into the depths of your own mind, what can you truly trust? How can you combat this? And Holmes answers these questions for himself in an intense and fairly awesomely meta final confrontation. But as the game's ending leaves the detective with much to recover from, it seems Holmes still needs to understand that answer for himself to truly ground himself and find his place. Personally, this journey mentally for Holmes is what struck me the strongest, and it's one I hope Frogwares continues to bring to a close in the next game before moving on to other subjects. This remake was missing one sore thumb of a cameo that the original experience had. If we are to experience yet again this piece of Holmes lore in a future Frogwares game, I can only hope that the devs are able to tie it into the themes of this one. Themes of companionship, friendship, trust, and vulnerability, of overcoming fear and finding strength in admitting it.
Some of my greatest memories and some of my lowest moments.
Overall, The Awakened is very worth playing, whether you've played the original, gotten through Chapter 1, or haven't played any of the Frogwares titles. On average, it'll keep you busy for about 10 to 12 hours, and a little longer if you're going to soak in every detail, solve every case, and get every trophy. As a Frogwares Holmes fan, despite the few flaws that this game has, I can offer nothing but praise for it, and I hope anyone who is interested in it makes an effort to pick up the game. Not only will you be supporting a great team based out of Ukraine, but experiencing a very fun adventure worthy of the Holmes title.